please have a seat again, and apologies for this delay, but we have the pleasure of having the consul of Bolivia coming from New York, and he just met with the president, and they were chit-chatting a little bit. So thank you for your patience. As I speak, actually, the speakers and respondents and interpreters can come to the stage while I give a little bit of a context around tonight's event. First of all, I want to tell you a little bit about the endowed chair. This is a position that has been supported by private donors, primarily Mr. Inserra and his family, and it has allowed us to organize a plethora of events, actually almost 100 in a decade. They're all transdisciplinary in nature, and they address all kinds of themes. Mostly we're interested in the ways in which Italy is part of transnational exchanges, and of course, migration plays a very important role in this. Which means that we talk about identity, belonging, language, and also intra-institutional and interinstitutional endeavors. Tonight, we're very local. We're going to be talking about New Jersey as much as we're going to be talking about Italy, Bolivia, and of course, the US at large. Practically every event we organize is collaborative in nature, and just to repeat again, because it's a pleasure to work with our colleagues, the Italian program, thank you Gina Miele in particular, the Department of World Languages and Cultures, I'm going to call my chair in a moment to the podium, the Department of Social Work and Child Advocacy, it's the first time we're working together, and I hope it's the first of many, and the Red Hawk Fellows, which I did not know about before this event, and we'll learn about that in a moment. We're working with Fondazione Patronato San Vincenzo, which, as you've learned, is behind La Ciudad del Niño in Bergamo, Italy, and also St. Benedict's Preparatory School. You've probably seen a lot of people wearing some jackets with the logo of it. Thank you for being here, so numerous. So at this point, I would like to ask the consul to come to the podium for some official greetings. It is a great, great honor to have you, and thank you for carving out the time from your incredibly busy schedule. I discovered that you're the consul of how many states? 11? 11. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you, everybody. It's a pleasure for me to be part of this presentation, to this dialogue. I know that you already saw or watched the documentary about the Ciudad del Niño. It's a beautiful initiative, beautiful support to poor communities in Bolivia and to those kids who needs parenting, who needs education, who needs a home. So I am glad to be part of this event, to be part with you, listening and watching all the activities that Ciudad de los Niños done in Bolivia and still doing there. And for us, it's a pleasure to be part of this initiative and try to support from the state, from Bolivia government, all the initiatives that can the Italian government, the Italia Bergamo community do to help our kids, our children in Bolivia. Thank you and welcome to this event. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marco. And Kate, would you like to say a couple of words? These events are always part of the activities that we have in our language department. Here's Kate Lois.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming this evening. I'd like to welcome all of our guests. I'm Kate Loyson, chair this semester of the Department of World Languages and Cultures at MSU, and we're just so pleased to be able to host this event under the auspices of the Inserra chair and the very hard work of Teresa Fiore, so I'd like to thank her for putting this all together. And let's start our discussion. Enjoy the evening.
And special thanks also to Michael Moore and Angela Carabelli, who are whispering into our guests' ears. They will be interpreting for us from Italian. And thank you, our crew over there, Amanda Cardo and Matt Wilson, and all the students for hosting us in this beautiful hall. Always a pleasure to be here. As I told you, we often do events about migration. It happens to be also the center of my research agenda. But this is the first time that we're also looking at social work, more specifically, public engagement, relationships with the community. The general topic we've already addressed a few months ago when we talked about a book called Svidania about life in orphanages and also transnational adoption. So it's not completely new, and we'd love to continue doing this. As a matter of fact, I will be teaching a class about adoption in the fall in the honors program, so it is a topic that is of great interest. The event is also part of a much larger endeavor called Memoria Presente, which is a digital archive about the common Spanish legacy in Italian and Latin American cultures, which was started as part of the federal designation of our university as a Hispanic serving institution. We were recognized as such a few years ago, and the project was supported by the National Endowment for the Humanities for the summer of 2021, indeed as part of an award that was specifically earmarked for faculty at Hispanic serving institutions. So I'm very pleased to have this event as part of a series that we have called Dentro Afuera, that has brought so far other screenings about the relationships between Italy and Chile, and cooking workshops about the relationships between Italy and Mexico. And today, as we know, we're focusing on the relationship between Italy and Bolivia. This is the link to the webpage for the event, just in case you want to read more about our guests, but here they are, and they're not necessarily in order, so maybe you can raise your hand. Sergio Gamberoni, Elena Bellina, Fulvio Diploma, Svetlana Shpiegel, if I pronounced it correctly, Mario Gallo, and Arian Craig. I'm going to introduce them very briefly, and you can read about their bio yourself, so that in the interest of time, we can concentrate on the content. It's a great pleasure to introduce Elena, who's currently teaching at NYU in Italian studies. But I say this because it's through the relationship and now friendship with her that I've discovered this gem of a documentary, which touched me in many different ways for the reasons that I have explained. And I am incredibly grateful to her because she has introduced me to really special people in Bolivia and in Italy, and I have discovered a very stimulating world. And I hope, again, this is the beginning of many conversations.
Is it on? Yeah. Thank you very much, Teresa. It's a real pleasure to be here to talk about the relationship between Italy and Bolivia, but especially between Bergamo and Cochabamba. I was born and raised in Bergamo. That's the reason why I ended up in Cochabamba one day. And as you saw from what Teresa just said and from the documentary, for those of you who were here, there's a long history, there's a long relationship going on between northern Italy, and especially Bergamo, and Bolivia, and Cochabamba. It's a long and ongoing relationship, a very positive one. And in the 1950s, late 1950s, the then Pope, John the 23rd, originally from Bergamo, was approached by the Bolivian church for help with foster homes, especially the big one in La Paz, the capital of Bolivia. And so they asked for help. And John the 23rd thought of a dear friend in Bergamo, another religious person, another priest, Father Beppo Giuseppe Vavassori, who during World War I in Bergamo started to gather World War I orphans who lost their fathers in the battlefields, and thought that he could give them an education and gather them together. So he started with a visionary project that today is the foundation Patronato San Vincenzo of Bergamo, that keeps his name, Don Beppo Vavassori. And he had the dream of giving abandoned or orphan kids for different reasons an education, a life, and a future. That project that he started in the early 1920s took on and became a big reality in the 1920s and 30s, when Italy was a very poor country. Speaking of poor country, full of people leaving and migrating to other countries in search of future. And so he decided to create this center. And the Pope, John the 23rd, were very much aware of this. And when Bolivia approached him, talking about kids, he thought of Don Beppo, his friend back in Bergamo, and asked him, please go down to Bolivia and see what you see. And we'll take it from there. And that's how everything started. Don Beppo went down. He was already in his late 70s, in the late 1950s. He went down, saw the situation in La Paz, came back to Rome and Bergamo, and they asked him to think about young people to send down and see what he could do. For those of you who were here for the documentary opens with his words, his diaries, where he tells about what he saw in Bolivia, all these kids down the streets and the poverty. And he related to that. He was himself the son of farmers from the area of Bergamo in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And so he thought he had young people, young men, a young priest especially. You saw the hero of this documentary, Father Antonio Berta, whom he sent down. And at that point, this relationship started because he agreed with Father Berta that they could start this mission. And here in these maps, I mean, I don't know how many of you know where Bergamo and Cochabamba are, honestly. You probably know where Florence is, where Rome is, where Milan is, but not really where Bergamo is, right? I mean, so Bergamo is half an hour from Milan, to give you some context, and Cochabamba is up in the Andes. So here you can visualize the distance between the two cities and how long it took in the late 1950s to fly for a man in his 70s from Bergamo to Cochabamba, you can to La Paz first and then to Cochabamba. You can only imagine the effort, the heroic effort he took, and how he went down, and he was in love immediately with what he saw there in the 1950s, because it was pretty much like Italy in the 1920s, in the mid-1910s, 1915, 1919, 1920s, and he thought he could start again that story there. And that's how he started. He took over, and Teresa, if you can go on, he decided, one second, there's another map where you can visualize much better. On the podium. Okay, that's the distance nowadays if you want to fly from Bergamo to Bolivia. I mean, we have Fulvio who came from Cochabamba to New York and New Jersey the other day, and it took him 17 hours. But, you know, these days you can do it in 20 hours. Back then, you can only imagine it was a day of flying from one place to the other. And Cochabamba is high up in the Andes. It's at 8,500 foot above sea level, so it's really high up. And Teresa, if you can move. Here you see Father Beppo Vavassori, Father Giuseppe Beppo Vavassori, when he boarded a plane in 1966, in June 1966, when he accepted to take over the foundation in La Paz. And there, the second picture to the right is him with the Bolivian authorities signing the agreement, the Italian-Bolivian agreement. And then at the bottom, you see Father Vavassori with Father Antonio Berta, who was a young man just ordained, whom he decided would be the person realizing his dream in Bolivia, and sent him down. It was 1966, 1967. And Teresa, if you can go on. Here, the previous one. Here you see what the young man, Don Antonio Berta, when he was sent from La Paz to Cochabamba to see what the situation was like, he immediately saw the dream of buying a lot of land on the side of the Andes and build the city of kids, La Ciudad del Niño. He purchased from the local campesinos a big lot of land, which was deserted land. It was empty, it was very harsh land on a slope, which is where today the Ciudad is located. He bought it and he paid a tractor. He didn't pay money. The campesinos, the peasants, wanted just a tractor. And then with friends from Italy, young people he knew, he started to dig on that land and to build the first home, the largest, which is still the largest to this day, and to realize this city of the children. You see him there, up there in the first picture to the right, with the first kids. Back then, he would drive around with his motorcycles and gather kids down the street and offer them a place where to sleep for the night. His dream was to realize a big school, as Don Beppo, the original, but the founder, Vavassori, did in Bergamo. I mean, it was a question of giving the kids not just shelter, but provide them with an education and a future. And that's how the place took shape. It was opened officially on the 19th of December of 1971, and the following year, in 1972, it became a school and a center for boys and girls. And then he started to open the schools. Teresa, if you can go on, please. Yeah, the one. No, the previous one. Yeah, here you see what the city of children looked like when I went down in 2005. Because I'm from Bergamo, and I've always heard the story of La Ciudad del Niño in Cochabamba, and I heard that the founder, Father Antonio Berta, was very ill at that point. He had lung problems and very poor vision. I asked in Bergamo, why don't you record his voice, I mean his story? And they told me how, and I said, well, with a movie. And back then I was already in the US, in grad school here in New York. And I said, well, if you want, I can go down from New York, which is much shorter, and take a look. And they said, okay, now think about it and come back with a proposal. I did it, and with my colleagues and friends, Flavio, Verusca, and Gabriele, we really went down for 3 weeks, and we interviewed Father Berta for 21 days. And as you saw, it's not just Padre Berta. It's a whole community of volunteers, of different people, not just Italians, Bolivians, and many from other nationalities, that then started to turn this beautiful place into many other places, the hospitals, the house for disabled kids, and all the other activities. And with the last one, I leave you to what I saw in 2005, and what you saw with me with the documentary is one reality that started from the death of Father Antonio Berta in 2007. As I said, he was very sick, so we just made it in time to record his voice and his stories in 2005, in the summer of 2005, because he died in 2007 at the age of 80 years old. And then the Ciudad started on a different path. They developed a new project in the 2010s and now 2020, sponsored by UNICEF, a new approach to raising kids and giving them an education, which is now very, very successful, as Fulvio and Father Sergio will tell you. So I leave the mic to Fulvio now, who will continue to tell you what happened from 2010 on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elena. Sorry, I'm learning how to use this. I made it. I finally figured out. Fulvio, a great pleasure to have you here. As Elena said, it's been a very, very long journey to New York. And we're particularly appreciative of your effort. As you can imagine, is in charge of many, many kids over there. And so taking a break is really something exceptional. And I just wanted to say something as I was chatting with Fulvio when he came to New York. It was so overwhelmed by the diversity and all that was going on, especially in Manhattan. And he just asked me something so powerful. He said, what is it that keeps you together? And I'm just going to leave it at that. Obviously, I didn't have an answer. But I thought it was interesting that for him, what represents a glue in a community is something that drives him.
Buonasera a tutti. Faccio alcune premesse prima di iniziare la conferenza, la prima premessa, l'avete già capita, parlerò in italiano perché il mio inglese è pessimo.
Good evening to all. I just have to make a couple of premises here. The first is I will be speaking in Italian because my English is not very good.
Ringrazio gli organizzatori, ringrazio Teresa, le persone che ci sono qui sul palco per questa opportunità. Ho parlato della Ciudad del Niño in tanti posti e in tanti contesti, mai a New York.
I'd like to thank all the organizers here, Teresa, all the panelists here on stage for this opportunity. I spoke about La Ciudad de los Niños in many places, in many different ways, but never in New York City.
Ringrazio voi che vi siete dati il tempo di venire questa sera a trascorrere qualche oretta con noi e ringrazio il console per questo regalo che ci ha dato. Settimana scorsa ho avuto la possibilità di incontrare e ricevere alla Ciudad del Niño il governatore di Cochabamba, però il console è un altro livello.
So thank you all students also for taking the time to be here with us for a couple of hours. I'd like to thank the consul as well, the consul who came here. I spoke last week in Cochabamba with the governor of Cochabamba, but this is great. This level of consul is even better.
E l'ultima premessa, parlo della Ciudad del Niño, parlo della Bolivia, voi direte ma sei italiano? Sì, sono italiano, ma ho imparato a amare la Bolivia, ho imparato a amare Cochabamba. Raccontavo al console, mia moglie è boliviana, mio figlio è italiano e boliviano, quindi per me Bergamo o Cochabamba più o meno è la stessa cosa.
The last premise is that, yes, I speak a lot about Cochabamba, la Ciudad de los Niños, Bolivia in general, and you would ask me, am I Italian? Yes, I'm Italian, but I learned to love Bolivia as my homeland. I learned to love Cochabamba. My wife is Bolivian, my son is half Bolivian, half Italian, so to me, Bergamo, Cochabamba makes no difference.
In questi minuti io cercherò di raccontare quello che è stato fatto alla Ciudad del Niño dopo gli anni di questo documentario. Quindi cosa è successo alla Ciudad del Niño negli ultimi 15 anni che sono coincisi anche con la morte di padre Berta nel 2007, che si è morto ma era talmente importante e conosciuto a Cochabamba che lui continua a riposare dentro la Ciudad del Niño per un permesso speciale dato dal governatore in quegli anni.
So I, in a very few minutes, will try to tell you the story of La Ciudad de los Niños after the filming of the documentary that you just saw. So 15 years in the making after the death of Father Berta, who died, as was said, in 2007. His death was so important to us, and so important for Cochabamba, that his remains are still in Cochabamba thanks to a special permit given by the governor of Cochabamba.
La domanda per iniziare è come funziona il sistema di accoglienza, il sistema di protezione dei bambini in Bolivia. Ecco, il sistema di accoglienza dei bambini è sostanzialmente pubblico. Noi come Ciudad del Niño siamo uno dei tanti centri che in qualche modo sono delegati dai servizi sociali per accogliere questi bambini.
So the first question may be, how does our system of accommodation and protection of children work? Substantially, it is a public system. We in the Ciudad are one of the centers that are actually delegated with the responsibility of taking care of the children.
Il lavoro che fa la Ciudad del Niño è il lavoro che fa ogni papà e ogni mamma in una qualsiasi famiglia del mondo.
The work of the Ciudad is the work of any mother or any father within a family.
Credo che i risultati migliori in ogni ambito di lavoro si hanno quando c'è una buona collaborazione tra un sistema pubblico e un sistema privato. E questo è quello che siamo riusciti anche come Ciudad del Niño a costruire in questi anni insieme a varie istituzioni di Cochabamba, ai servizi sociali di Cochabamba, al sistema dei giudici e di prima accoglienza della città.
So I believe that the best results in any field of work are achieved when there's a good cooperation between the public and private sector. And this is something that we managed to do in La Ciudad with a number of partners, institutional partners, social services, the judiciary, and our houses as a first refuge of first response for children.
Attualmente in Bolivia ci sono circa 5.800 bambini accolti nel sistema di protezione, la maggior parte in Cochabamba, e anche se effettivamente sono diminuiti in questi anni, non sono ancora diminuite le cause e i problemi che portano i bambini a entrare dentro il sistema.
So currently, there are about 5,800 children that are assisted in Bolivia, the majority of which are in Cochabamba. And even if the numbers of these children are fewer and fewer each year, the causes that bring them into our centers are very difficult to manage, and they're growing higher.
Qualcosa si è sentito nel documentario e è un po' triste pensare che in tanti anni ancora alcune cose non siano cambiate. Alcune delle cause principali che portano i bambini a venire da noi e le famiglie a dividersi sono le stesse di 15 anni fa, tra cui l'alcolismo, la troppa violenza all'interno delle famiglie e anche una fatica a dare il giusto ruolo alla donna all'interno della famiglia.
So in our documentary that you just saw, sadly, we saw that throughout the years, the causes that bring these children to our centers have not changed. One of the main causes is the breakdown of families. And the three factors that influence and impact children's lives in a negative way are still alcoholism, extreme violence in families, and the difficulty in recognizing the important role of women within families.
Mentre parlo vi farò vedere alcune foto perché troppe parole annoiano, ma le foto aiutano ad ascoltare. Quindi vediamo alcune foto che abbiamo portato qui.
As I speak, I will let you see some photos because talking too much gets boring. So with a little bit of visualization, I think it'll ease the conversation.
La Ciudad del Niño ha assunto in questi 50 anni la sfida di prendersi cura dei più deboli e dei più bisognosi. E lo fa con l'umiltà di chi sa che da soli non si può cambiare il mondo, ma anche con la consapevolezza che ogni più piccolo contributo può cambiare la vita delle persone.
So the Ciudad, in the course of its 50 years of existence, has seized the challenges of helping the vulnerable and the needy with a sense of humility, of knowing that you can't go this alone, you can't change the world alone, so even the smallest contribution can help change lives.
Negli ultimi 15 anni, quello che abbiamo provato a fare alla Ciudad del Niño è tentare di rileggere i bisogni della società e del contesto sociale e culturale che stiamo vivendo, che come in tutto il mondo continua a cambiare.
So in the past 15 years, we have tried at the Ciudad to rethink what the needs are of children in society. Let's say the social and cultural context in which we live, and that is continuously changing and that we continuously need to adapt to.
E lo abbiamo fatto cambiando profondamente la nostra struttura, studiando, aprendo nuovi progetti e nuove collaborazioni. E dentro questo cambiamento è successo qualcosa di incredibile perché circa 6-7 anni fa ci ha cercato Unicef Bolivia, da cui è iniziata una lunga collaborazione che va ancora avanti, e ci ha scelti per portare avanti un progetto sotto il titolo, sotto il nome Per il diritto a vivere in famiglia.
So we made radical changes to our facility structure. We studied new plans, we launched new programs, we formed new cooperative initiatives. And this brought real change. And at the same time, something incredible happened. 6-7 years ago, Bolivia UNICEF actually approached us, contacted us to form a collaborative initiative together, and it is still ongoing today. And the program is called For the Right to Live with the Family.
Com'è cambiata la Ciudad del Niño da quel momento? La prima cosa è questa. È passata dall'essere un semplice centro di accoglienza per bambini a un'istituzione caratterizzata per avere un modello di accoglienza familiare con tanti programmi di accoglienza e di prevenzione.
So how did the Ciudad actually change? It went from a simple accommodation center to a family-oriented accommodation center with a number of accommodation and prevention programs.
Istituzione è un posto in cui i bambini non trovano un riferimento familiare ad accoglierli. È un posto in cui tanti bambini dormono tutti insieme nella stessa stanza. È un posto in cui c'è una cucina che prepara da mangiare per 150 persone.
So in an institution, children do not have family contact. They don't have a sense of family life in these institutions. Many children sleep all together in the same room. There are large kitchens that have the capacity of feeding 150 children.
L'istituzione è un posto in cui c'è un educatore per 20-25 bambini o in cui tutti i bimbi vanno nella stessa scuola o in cui si vive solo in case di maschi o femmine, in cui non ci sono relazioni al di fuori dell'istituzione, in cui c'è una gestione economica centralizzata.
In an institution, an educator, the ratio is 20-25 students to the teacher, to the educator. Children, all of the children within the institution go to the same school. The houses are divided between boys and girls, male and female, and there is no other connection outside of the institution. And also the economy within the institution itself is centralized.
Il modello familiare è questo. È un modello in cui al centro c'è il concetto di famiglia all'interno di ogni progettualità.
So this is an example of a family model. So it's at the core of it is the concept of the family.
Abbiamo 12 case famiglia. In ognuna delle case in questo momento c'è una cucina come in qualsiasi casa come la vostra.
Right now we have about 12 family houses, and in each they all have their own private kitchens, like a normal kitchen like you would have.
Dove i bambini sono parte integrante di qualsiasi cosa della casa, quindi anche della preparazione degli alimenti, del comprare gli alimenti al mercato, scegliendo quelli che magari costano di meno in un certo periodo o sono di stagione.
So in these houses, the children are an integral part of its management. They even participate in the preparation of food, in buying the food, in going to the markets, and trying to find the most economical, most cost-effective foods to buy.
Perché vi dico questo? Perché in questi anni in Bolivia siamo diventati un po' il riferimento in un contesto nazionale di che cosa significa accogliere i bambini dentro a un modello familiare.
Why do I say all of this? I say this because in Bolivia, we have become a national reference point when it comes to family accommodation centers.
I nostri bambini sanno che non vivono in una famiglia normale, ma la Ciudad del Niño è una grande famiglia. Noi non nascondiamo che siamo un'istituzione che accoglie tanti bambini, ma facciamo il più possibile per rendere tutto il più familiare possibile.
So the children in our institution do not live a normal family life. The Ciudad is a large family to us, but it certainly cannot substitute a real family. We do our best to have them live in the conditions that are as family-like as possible.
Vado avanti un po' veloce. Dopo aver ristrutturato il centro di accoglienza con questo modello familiare, si è cercato di prendere in mano un altro problema, un'altra situazione, che è il rapporto con le famiglie di origine.
So after restructuring the center, following the family model, we tried to tackle another issue, and that is the relationship of children with their families of origin.
Prima, anni fa, era molto probabile che quando un bambino entrasse nella Ciudad de los Niños rimanesse per tutta la vita. E questa cosa è ciò che ancora accade nella maggior parte dei centri della Bolivia.
Years ago, when a child entered La Ciudad, it was understood that the child would live there for the rest of his life. And this is what happens in the majority of centers in Bolivia.
Fin dal primo giorno in cui accogliamo un bambino, i nostri assistenti sociali, psicologhi e l'equipe educativa lavora per iniziare fin da subito, dove possibile, un miglioramento delle relazioni familiari.
So from the very first day we receive a child, we immediately jump into action. That is a team of social workers, psychologists, educators, work to immediately, where possible, find a way to improve their relations with their family of origin.
Anche in questo è stato fondamentale l'apporto di UNICEF. Qualche giorno prima il giorno prima di venire qui, abbiamo registrato un video pubblico che sarà sui siti internet nostro e di UNICEF, in cui spieghiamo e rendiamo disponibile a tutte le istituzioni quello che è stato il nostro lavoro per creare e ricreare le condizioni di avvicinamento dei bambini alle famiglie di origine, come fosse un corso autoguidato in internet.
And fundamental was the contribution of UNICEF. The day before I left to come here, we actually published a video on both of our sites, on the Ciudad sites and UNICEF sites, that explains our work on how we create and recreate and rebuild these relationships between the children and their families of origin, almost as if it was like a course online.
Nella foto di prima vi mostravo uno degli incontri di un ragazzo con sua mamma a poche ore di distanza da noi, 2 o 3 ore di distanza da noi, e nella foto seguente lavorare con le famiglie significa anche ricucire i lutti e i dolori, come nel caso di questa famiglia di 4 sorelline che abbiamo accompagnato l'anno scorso e non hanno più una famiglia intesa come papà e mamma.
So in the first photo, you saw an encounter between a mother and a son. And in the following photo, you see how we deal with grief, death, and pain. The story of the 4 little sisters that we assisted that no longer have parents.
Dopo è venuto il momento di un'altra sfida. E la sfida era quella di ricostruire il lavoro con gli adolescenti. Perché quando uno ha 14-15 anni e non si è potuto reintegrarlo all'interno di una famiglia, l'obiettivo primario diventa il renderlo autonomo e responsabile per inserirsi con indipendenza all'interno della società.
And another challenge that we tried to tackle was how to restructure our work with adolescents, because if a child isn't placed within his family of origin or within a family in general, by the time he or she is 14 or 15, then our objective is to make the teenager as independent and responsible as possible so that he or she can be reintegrated into society.
Abbiamo 2 case giovanili per ragazzi dei 14 e 18 anni e 2 appartamenti per ragazzi dopo i 18 anni, in cui accompagnarli in questo processo graduale di indipendenza. Tutti i nostri ragazzi dai 14 ai 15 anni studiano e lavorano. Fermarsi all'interno del progetto è una loro scelta e noi non abbiamo un obbligo, perché dopo i 18 anni la tutoria dello Stato viene meno, ma non viene meno il nostro sentirci responsabili verso di loro e le loro vite.
So we have 2 houses for 14 to 18-year-olds and 2 apartments for 18-year-olds and beyond that age. And we try to guide them along this process towards independence. And all the students from 14 to 15 study and work. Then after the age of 18, it is the 18-year-old's choice to stay or not in the Ciudad, because at that point the state no longer claims guardianship over that person because he's no longer a minor. So that is something, but we continue to follow the 18-year-old because we still feel the responsibility towards that child.
Gli ultimi 2 progetti sono anche i più belli e i più nuovi, e uno di 2 è l'inaugurazione di questa casa, che è l'unica casa di accoglienza per le situazioni di grave emergenza di tutta Cochabamba, intesa come regione di Cochabamba.
So the last 2 projects are probably the most beautiful and the newest. One is the inauguration of an accommodation center for very serious emergencies, and this covers the area of Cochabamba as a region.
Perché è importante questa casa? Per 2 ragioni. La prima, ve l'ho detto, è l'unica, aperta 24 ore al giorno, 365 giorni l'anno.
Why is this house important? The first reason is because it is the only one that exists in the region, open 24 hours a day, 365 days a year.
Secondo, perché non ci limitiamo, come dice la legge, ad accogliere i bambini, ma dal primo giorno con le nostre equipe educative lavoriamo per cercare relazioni familiari in tutta la Bolivia e creare opportunità di reintegrazioni familiari.
Secondly, because we don't limit ourselves, as I said before, to just receiving and sheltering the child, but we work from the very instant we receive them to find a way to build relationships throughout Bolivia and to create opportunities of family reintegration.
Questo crea una conseguenza bellissima, che circa il 60%, 70%, dipende dagli anni, dei bambini accolti, in un anno accogliamo circa 80-90 bambini in questa casa, non entrano definitivamente nel sistema di protezione perché riusciamo a riportarli in una famiglia, o nella famiglia di origine o nella famiglia allargata, che in Bolivia è una buona base sociale di aiuto per le famiglie stesse.
So this creates an incredibly beautiful result. 60% or 70%, depending on the year, because we receive about 80 to 90 children each year. 60 or 70% of these children do not permanently or do not stay within our centers, do not live with our centers. They actually are reintegrated with their families of origin or with their extended families.
L'ultimo progetto, aperto circa 3 anni fa con UNICEF, è davvero il più bello. Si tratta del primo progetto pilota in tutto il paese, in tutta la Bolivia, di un'esperienza di famiglie affidatarie.
So the last project that was launched about 3 years ago with UNICEF is the most beautiful. It is the first pilot project in the whole of Bolivia to promote a new foster care system.
E l'ho detto prima, un'istituzione come la nostra, con tutte le accortezze necessarie per essere il più familiare possibile, non è una famiglia. L'esperienza delle famiglie affidatarie è il primo passo per cambiare alla radice il sistema di accoglienza. Dalla nostra esperienza sono nate altre esperienze in Bolivia, tentando di raggiungere anche standard internazionali che sono presenti già in molti paesi del mondo e ci sono anche negli Stati Uniti.
So, as I said, La Ciudad is an institution, and with all of the love and all of the attention in the world, it will never be a family. So the experience of the foster family care is a great opportunity to radically change our system of accommodation, an experience that has been modeled in other projects throughout Bolivia, and that has tried to reach the international standards that we see in systems in the United States, for example.
Le famiglie affidatarie accolgono per un periodo di tempo un bambino come se fosse suo figlio. E qui bisogna sottolineare l'importanza dell'accoglienza dei bambini piccoli all'interno di un contesto familiare e quanto cambi la loro vita il modo in cui vengono accuditi nei primi 1000 giorni di vita.
So the foster care family receives a child and raises the child as if the child was their own. And what is very important here is that when we're talking about very small children, we have to consider how this emotionally impacts the life of the child. And the life of the child is impacted emotionally in the first 1,000 days of his or her life.
Come potete vedere, tutti i nostri sforzi sono orientati attorno all'idea di familiarità e per noi è un piacere parlare qui o davanti ad altre istituzioni della nostra esperienza.
So as you can see, all of our efforts are centered around the concept of family, and I am pleased to talk about this here as well as in other venues.
Il mio sogno è che col tempo la Ciudad del Niño poco a poco possa scomparire e che i bimbi possano essere accolti tutti dentro a una famiglia.
My dream is that the Ciudad could gradually disappear and that children will all be received by families.
La Ciudad del Niño difficilmente scomparirà, purtroppo, però può diminuire e può convertirsi in un sistema di accoglienza diverso, diurno, con attenzioni verso le famiglie esterne. Però l'importante per noi è tracciare dei nuovi cammini.
The Ciudad will hardly disappear, unfortunately, but it can change. It can transform the system of accommodation. During the day, for example, we can concentrate our attention on helping families. So we want to initiate a new pathway towards this transformation.
Finisco perché ho sicuramente sforato qualche minuto e c'è qualcuno che capisce l'italiano bene.
I'd like to end here because I know I went over my allotted time.
Facciamo tutto questo con un grande senso di responsabilità, ma anche con l'orgoglio di portare avanti gli insegnamenti di una persona come Padre Berta, così amata a Cochabamba in Bolivia.
We do all this with a strong sense of responsibility and also with a strong sense of pride to follow through with the teachings of Father Berta, who was so much loved by Cochabamba.
Ci sono alcune frasi che noi sempre ci ricordiamo di lui. Una l'ha detta lui stesso e diceva a tutte le persone che lavoravano con lui: ricordatevi ogni giorno di regalare almeno un sorriso o un gesto di amore ad ogni bambino.
We always recall or reminisce about some of the phrases said by Father Berta, and one in particular is when he would say, remember, always give a smile or a small sign of love to a child.
E l'ultima frase, e vi ringrazio, è quella che è diventata un po' il nostro lemma. Lui diceva sempre: mi basta sapere che ho salvato una vita. Grazie a tutti.
And with this last phrase, Father Berta would say, all I need to know is that I saved one life. Thank you.
Fulvio, and devo chiedere a Sergio e agli altri ospiti di essere un po' più veloci in order to stay within our time frame, but thank you so much for such a beautiful illustration of the very important changes that have happened at the Ciudad. Sergio, actually, we have a handout about a story that Fulvio has not mentioned. I'm going to distribute it in a moment, and you will read about the story of Marcos in particular. Father Sergio Gamberoni comes to us from Italy. He has spent a lot of time in Bolivia, but is currently based in Italy and actually focuses on migration. And today he will talk specifically about the Bolivian community in Bergamo and how it has changed over time and impacted the city as well. Thank you so much for being here. It's been a pleasure to get to know you in these days, Sergio.
Grazie mille, anch'io questa sera provo a raccontare una storia bellissima che succede in Italia, che ha a che fare con la Bolivia. Non ho moglie né figli, ma ho lasciato anch'io il cuore in Bolivia e l'ho ritrovata la Bolivia nella terra in cui ora vivo.
Thanks. I also have a very beautiful story to tell about the relationship between Italy and Bolivia. I have no wife, I have no children, but I also left my heart in Bolivia, but I rediscovered it really in the communities I found in Bergamo.
Un profondo rispetto per le persone di cui abbiamo raccontato, che hanno viaggiato con il cuore, e anche per tutti coloro che dalla Bolivia sono partiti e continuano a partire. Entrambi hanno un sogno e il desiderio di fare qualcosa di buono per il mondo, per le persone che amano, e quindi un profondo rispetto, ed entrambi sono sostenuti da delle comunità. Tutto l'investimento della Ciudad del Niño è sostenuto dalla preghiera, dai fondi di chi crede con loro, e anche chi migra ha alle spalle una famiglia che crede in loro.
With the deepest respect for those who travel with their hearts, for those who have left Bolivia, for those who are there trying to help the people in Bolivia, both deserve our greatest wishes. They deserve all of our love. I think that they have the support of the communities. The Ciudad de los Niños is supported by these communities, but also by the prayers of those who have to leave Bolivia.
Faccio una rapida storia, non spiego tutto, di ciò che è stata la migrazione boliviana a Bergamo, che è un caso singolare assolutamente interessante. Tra il 90 e il 2000, proprio a partire da questa esperienza della Ciudad del Niño, iniziano a formarsi un primo nucleo di persone boliviane che vivono a Bergamo, perché hanno conosciuto dei volontari, perché hanno avuto un'immagine positiva di Bergamo, perché si sono create delle amicizie, perché qualcuno è stato adottato, perché ci sono delle coppie miste, perché qualcuno trova lavoro.
I'm giving you a very brief survey of migration from Bolivia toward Bergamo, which took place between 1990 and 2000. Many of them became aware of Bergamo through the Ciudad de los Niños. And in Bolivia, that is what gave them a very positive image of Bergamo. Many of them developed friendships or were adopted or were parts of mixed couples, but had this very positive feeling toward Bergamo.
E qui succede una cosa incredibile. In pochi anni, dal 2000 al 2007, vedete poi in giallo, nel 2007 verrà introdotto un visto turistico, prima non c'era. In pochissimi anni, in una città di 120.000 persone, arrivano almeno 20-25.000 boliviani. Non tutti boliviani in realtà, perché è un fenomeno così grande che ci sono anche argentini e peruani che vanno a vivere in Bolivia, cambiano i propri documenti e partono come boliviani verso l'Italia.
And you see in these statistics underlined, highlighted in yellow, between 2000 and 2007, when a special tourist visa was created for the Bolivians, in a city of 120,000 people, we find the migration of 20 to 25,000 Bolivians. Not all, of course, were Bolivians. I mean, this is much too large a group to imagine. There were, in fact, some Argentinians and Peruvians who actually changed the nationality on their papers to figure as Bolivians.
Non devo spiegare a voi le dinamiche della migrazione, ma non sono i più poveri che partono. Chi parte è parte di famiglie che già hanno vissuto una migrazione dal campo alla città e soprattutto si parte con grande emozione nella speranza di trovare lavoro e di poter in pochi anni aiutare la propria famiglia. In anni in cui un anno di lavoro in Italia era come 10 anni di lavoro in Bolivia. E c'è chi in pochi anni è riuscito a mandare in Bolivia sufficiente denaro per costruire una casa, per far studiare un figlio, per la salute del proprio genitore.
As you know, it's often the poorest, and not just the poorest, that migrate. Their first migration is from the countryside into the city. It is a very emotional break, you could say, departure. They go in order to find work, in order to be able to help their families. But 1 year you would make as much money 1 year in Italy as it would take you 10 years to make that much money in Bolivia. And so those who have come to Italy in a very short time have been able to send enough money home to build a house in order to send their child to school or to take care of the health of a parent.
Non racconto tutta la storia della comunità boliviana che anche oggi è molto presente e importante a Bergamo, ma ho indicato dei passaggi per cui c'è un fenomeno di stabilizzazione e c'è un fenomeno poi di frammentazione della comunità. È un momento difficilissimo, capite che veniamo da Bergamo, io vengo proprio dal comune in cui è apparso il Covid in Europa, anche per la comunità boliviana in diaspora è stato un momento di messa alla prova enorme di relazioni, di nostalgia, di difficoltà lavorative, una prova grande che ha messo in ginocchio la comunità.
I won't give you the whole story then of this Bolivian community in Bergamo. It has been through quite a bit, as we see in these various passages. There's a period of stabilization, but there's also a period of fragmentation. I'm coming from Bergamo, which is one of the places that was hit first and hardest in the West by the COVID epidemic, which was also very difficult for the Bolivian diaspora. It really brought people to their knees. It was a real test of relationships. It was a real test of resilience.
Questa è la fotografia attuale della presenza della comunità boliviana, che è la più presente in Bergamo nella città e quindi ancora estremamente significativa. E questi sono i volti di un gruppetto di quella che è oggi la comunità cattolica, che è un piccolo gruppo soprattutto legato alla presenza femminile. In questo fenomeno migratorio ci sono famiglie che sono già costituite, la comunità cattolica che si trova settimanalmente è soprattutto di donne che sono lontane dalla loro famiglia da 10 o 20 anni e soffrono quindi, accanto a questo impegno grande verso i propri familiari, la nostalgia, la distanza e la domanda fino a quando è opportuno o necessario restare lontani dalla propria famiglia.
And this is just kind of like a photograph of this community, which is still the largest immigrant community in the city. You see their faces among the Catholic community, which, as you see, is predominantly women who are living away from home in this community, who have been away for 10 to 20 years and who are suffering from homesickness, who are wondering how long they're going to have to be this far apart and when can they return home.
Un altro volto, prendiamo Alvaro come esempio. La migrazione boliviana verso l'Italia avviene nella maggior parte dei casi, quasi per la totalità, con un visto turistico per poi dopo 3 mesi entrare in situazione di irregolarità. Per quanto tempo si può vivere irregolari in Italia? Alvaro ha fatto la sua festa dopo 16 anni di irregolarità in Italia, con moglie e figli. Ci sono donne, ne parlavo con una settimana scorsa, 24 anni di presenza in Italia, ancora irregolare, quindi non potendo tornare a visitare la propria famiglia, che ha salutato dicendo andrò via 1 anno o 2, e spesso senza una casa propria, ma sempre in casa delle persone che si seguono per lavoro.
I'm giving you the example of Alvaro. In Italy, the tourist visa that you get, on which most of these people came, is valid for 3 months. After that 3 months, you are out of status, as we would say in the United States. So you become what the Italians call irregular. I hesitate to use the word in English, illegal, But Alvaro has been in Italy 16 years without documents. He has a wife, he has children. There are a woman that I was speaking with just last week has been in Italy 24 years out of status and cannot go home. And when she left home the first time, she said that she was only going to be gone 1 or 2 years. Most of these people live in the houses of others for whom they work as a domestic servant.
Certamente ci sono anche famiglie che poi si ricongiungono, bambini che nascono e crescono, e per la comunità boliviana è da una parte molto facile anche a livello linguistico essere accolti ed inserirsi nella società italiana. D'altra parte si mantiene una forte identità culturale che adesso provo a descrivere.
It is easy enough for the families to be united, but I would add that for the Bolivians, it is fairly easy to be assimilated into Italian society in terms of language, jumping from the Spanish to the Italian. But nevertheless, they have a very strong cultural identity, which I will now try to explain.
Provo a descrivere 3 luoghi importanti, soprattutto nelle esplosioni di quei 7-10 anni in cui la comunità è stata enorme e quindi ha posto delle sfide alla città. 3 luoghi che ricordo. Uno è una parrocchia, una piccola parrocchia nella quale nel giro di pochi anni sono arrivate più di 10.000 persone a chiedere aiuto, è stata fatta una scheda sociale, si è aiutati a trovare lavoro, si è aiutati a trovare casa, con un enorme impegno da parte della Chiesa di Bergamo.
I'm going to describe 3 places that over the course of this sort of 7 to 10 years we've seen this explosion of the Bolivian presence in Bergamo. The first place, a parish where some 10,000 people arrived or are registered arriving looking for help finding work, help finding a home, and help that they were able to receive thanks to the commitment to the work of the Catholic Church.
Un secondo luogo è stata la scelta della Chiesa di Bergamo di dedicare una parrocchia, specialmente ai latinoamericani, che ha generato poi la possibilità di essere da parte di loro stessi accoglienti verso gli altri, in relazioni di mutuo aiuto, in celebrazioni religiose, in pranzi condivisi, in reti relazionali, e anche il luogo in cui con il comune si è messa in pista una formazione professionale e anche la possibilità di corsi di lingua italiana che hanno aiutato l'inserimento.
The second is that the Catholic Church of Bergamo decided to dedicate one parish to Latin Americans, which enabled sort of this community to provide mutual help to each other, to celebrate the Mass in Spanish, to have collective meals, but also to provide training for work and to provide Italian language courses.
Infine il Consolato di Bolivia, un italiano console onorario, ma anche il comune, le istituzioni pubbliche, la polizia, in una sinergia di forze che hanno cercato di mostrare il volto positivo e buono di un'integrazione caratterizzata da una forte identità culturale. Nelle feste, nelle celebrazioni, in un associazionismo, sono nate tantissime associazioni boliviane, soprattutto legate ai balli, legate all'identità culturale, legate alla promozione della propria identità. Quali lavori hanno trovato i boliviani arrivando a Bergamo? Soprattutto quello di assistenza alla persona, quello della ristorazione e quello per gli uomini di un settore specifico che è la sistemazione dei tetti. Oggi ci sono intere imprese boliviane che hanno praticamente monopolizzato un intero settore dell'edilizia.
So there has been a kind of synergy between the various forces in Bolivia, in Bergamo, helping the Bolivian community on the part of there's the Bolivian consulate, there is the honorary consul of Italy, there is a municipality, the police, etc., trying to give a very positive face to Bergamo in the integration of the Bolivians and allowing them to preserve a very strong cultural identity. This is expressed also through popular festivals, through Bolivian associations, which organize dances, which promote their culture and the cultural identity. And in terms of the kind of jobs that they find in Bergamo, there's really 3 different categories. On the one hand, there is I would say personal assistant, helping someone, in the house. There is the restaurant area, and there is also roofing. You find even independent companies have been formed of Bolivians that are doing roofing.
Ci sarebbero molte cose da dire sulle questioni sociali rispetto a quello che è successo in Bergamo in quei giorni e in quegli anni. Pochissimi problemi di criminalità, alcune questioni mediche legate a malattie specifiche come il Chagas e dinamiche purtroppo anche di sfruttamento tra i primi arrivati e gli ultimi. Ma vorrei dare uno sguardo positivo a un carattere folcloristico e culturale di cui Bergamo oggi si sente arricchita.
Just there is lots that I could say about the social situation, but I will limit myself to pointing out that there is very little criminality. There have been some specific medical issues such as Chagas. There has also been a problem of exploitation of recently arrived migrants by the migrants that arrived at a much earlier date. But I'd like to also talk about the very positive things regarding folklore and culture by which Bergamo feels that it has been enriched.
Bellissimo l'orgoglio di una comunità che coi propri balli, Tincus, Morenada, Chacarera e cambiamo e Tobas dice con orgoglio e pubblica addirittura un mensile: qui Bolivia, qui ci siamo noi, non ci sono i numeri, non ci sono i problemi, ci sono le storie, c'è l'orgoglio, c'è lo sport, c'è il cibo, c'è la voglia di partecipazione, nonostante un legame con la terra d'origine anche politico molto conflittivo. Sono gli anni in cui Bolivia si spacca e ci sono in Bergamo manifestazioni a favore o contro il governo boliviano.
But there is a pride that you see expressed in these various regional dances that they have, and here in one of Italy's biggest papers, La Repubblica, you see it says, "Here is Bolivia." There's no problem of crime. This is a story of this is a culture of stories, a culture of pride, a culture of sports, a culture of food. There is conflict. I mean, we find even within in this period in which Bolivia is really split, we also find Bolivian groups that are both in favor of and against the current government.
Io mi occupo di migrazione, in Bergamo ci sono decine di comunità, ma di quella boliviana vorrei sottolineare un passato che ha a che vedere con una storia bella in Bolivia della Ciudad del Niño, un presente sorprendente, multiculturale, multilinguistico, multireligioso. A Bergamo, una piccola città, la seconda comunità più grande dell'Europa boliviana. E concludo con la consapevolezza che anche con i boliviani a Bergamo stiamo costruendo il nostro futuro.
So, there are dozens of different communities within Bergamo, but I would like to, just with regard to the Bolivian community in Bergamo, there is this past that we've been talking about in the Ciudad de los Niños, but a present, and this present is of a very multicultural, very multilinguistic, and a multi-religious community. The Bolivian community in Bergamo is the second largest Bolivian community in Europe. There's this awareness then of the Bolivians among Bergamo, and we see them also as our future.
Non so se ci sono dei boliviani presenti, ma se Fulvio ha detto grazie a Bergamo per ciò che si è fatto in Bolivia, io oggi a New York dico grazie Bolivia per essere a Bergamo.
So I don't know if there are any Bolivians in the audience, but as Fulvio sort of expressed his gratitude to New York for accommodating Bolivia, I would also like to thank Bolivia for what it has given Bergamo.
Thank you, Father Sergio. A fascinating story of a migration which is obviously linked to economic need, but it's also very much connected to a project. And so this is a very unique story. Thank you for sharing it. We're going to now move to the United States. We skipped a couple of things. With colleague Svetlana Shpiegel from the Department of Social Work and Child Advocacy, whom I want to thank for embracing this project so eagerly and for sharing with us in a moment kind of an overview of what happens with foster care in the United States as part of our comparative approach. Thank you, Svetlana.
Thanks, Teresa. Can you hear me? My voice doesn't really carry all that well. You can?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I'm going to talk a little bit about foster care here in the United States and kind of how this compares with some of the things that we have heard from our colleagues here. So just a couple of basic facts about foster care here. About 400,000 kids are in foster care in the United States each year, right? So we have a big, big population of kids that are in care. Some are entering that year, some are exiting, but on average, about 400,000 kids are in care every given year. And the other thing that sometimes is a surprise to colleagues from other countries is that the United States foster care system is not one system. It is a system that is state-run, right, and sometimes even county-run, depending on the state. So you could have a very different foster care system here in New Jersey and say in Texas or in Mississippi or in California. There is federal legislation that sort of encourages states to do certain things, but at the end of the day, each state has some autonomy in terms of determining how the foster care system is going to look. So in terms of kind of some of the basic facts that you could see here, there's some differences from what we've heard from our colleagues in Bolivia. And one of the main differences is the majority of kids here in the United States who are in foster care are not in group care. They are either in non-relative foster homes or they are placed with relatives. So about 80% of kids would fall into these two placement types, non-relative care or relative care, right? And institutions, large institutions or smaller group care, sort of similar to what our colleague here described that's happening now, that accounts now only for about 10% of overall kids who are placed in care. Now, for adolescents, the rates are a little bit higher, right? But overall, the rates of group care and kids who are in institutions are relatively low. And the federal legislation here actually now de-incentivizes states to place kids in group care and incentivizes them to place them in non-relative foster homes, or even more so to reunify them with their biological caregivers or to place them with relatives, right? So there's some differences there. And that kind of goes to the three goals of the US foster care system, which is permanency, safety, and well-being. And in terms of permanency, the idea is that foster care is an inherently temporary arrangement, right? It's not a permanent arrangement for kids, and it shouldn't be a permanent arrangement. So the goal is to, even kids who enter foster care, we want them to reach permanency. We want them to either get reunified with their biological caregivers if services are provided and it can be done safely, right? Or we want to place them with other permanent caregivers, be that adoption, which is a goal for some kids, or relative care and other guardianship and other permanent arrangements, right? And the idea with that is that kids don't thrive certainly in institutions, as again was mentioned here before, and they also thrive when they're connected to their original families in some ways. So now in New Jersey and also in other parts of the state, of the country, I'm sorry, we really, really try to kind of put kids back with their relatives as much as we possibly can. So there's some special programs that happen, and I'm really curious to hear how this works and what are some of the things that are happening in Bolivia. But one of the specialized types of foster care is called therapeutic or treatment foster care, and that is an arrangement for kids who have higher needs, be that either medical needs, right, so high-need medically complex children, or it could be behavioral and mental health needs as well. And these foster parents who take those children receive additional training, and they also receive incentives that are higher in terms of financial incentives to take those kids in. And then we also have our independent and transitional living programs that are kind of similar again to what has been discussed here, and that is for kids who are about to age out of the foster care system, right? So it's for children who are reaching the age of 15 and 14 and 16, right? And they're kind of preparing to transition out of the foster care system and into adult independence. And these programs are preparing these kids for independence initially with some instruction, and eventually by allowing them to live in apartments and other kind of semi-independent arrangements as well. And by the way, in terms of the age where kids have to terminate and age out of the foster care system, that happens between ages of 18 and 21. Most states now allow kids to stay in foster care until age 21, and that has been very much evidence-based intervention for those children. We have a lot of research that shows that kids who stay in foster care longer, right, so they don't exit at age 18, they stay until age 21, their outcomes in terms of education and employment and stability in living arrangements are much better than those kids who exit earlier, right? So there is some incentive for states as well, right, to keep children in care for a little bit longer to allow them for a smooth transition, because, you know, I think we all know that most of us were not independent from our families at age 18, right? And it's not realistic to expect for kids to be completely on their own at 18 years old. So just in terms of some general characteristics of kids who are in care here in the United States, we have a really big group of kids that are young, right? So they're under the age of 5 and under. It's probably the largest group of kids. About 40% of children who are in foster care in the United States are young children, right? And then we have the other big group, and that is adolescents, right? So adolescents ages 12 and older are also a big group who are in care, and actually a pretty complex group because it's oftentimes harder to find foster care placements for the older children. There is also a lot of racial overrepresentation of kids in the United States who are in foster care. So BIPOC children, right, so Black, Hispanic, Indigenous, are overrepresented in the foster care system in the US as compared to white and Asian children, right? So that is also something to that we have grappled with a lot, and there are a lot of complex reasons for that overrepresentation, and it's been tackled as well. And then the last thing I'm gonna say, obviously the United States foster care system has been in existence for many years. There have been resources that came into that system that are unprecedented relatively to other countries. And yet we have quite a bit of challenges in our foster care system as well, right? So one of our biggest challenges is that we do not have enough foster parents who are qualified and want to take care of children, right? So it's always a struggle to find qualified foster parents, and that is especially challenging for high-need children, right? So children with behavioral and medical needs, and also for kids who are older, right? For adolescents who very much still need a family, but also have unique needs in terms of independence, and not all foster parents are able to accommodate that. Some other challenges that we have, a lot of times, and heartbreaking for a child to go through all of these placements and seeing them not to work out, right? So that is very much an issue. For adolescents, that issue is even more significant. And again, there's some work being done to reduce placement instability. And part of it is to place kids with kinship families, right? So you place them with relatives. Those arrangements tend to be more stable. And obviously reunification when it's safely possible. And then some other issues that we have overrepresentation, as I said, families of colors that we really need to address. And we have over-surveillance of those families as well, right? So that contributes to that over-representation, and that is something that is urgently needed to address. because we want to keep children in their communities, connected with their communities, connected with their identities, right? So that is an issue as well. And then at the end of the day, most research shows that if we can adequately support birth parents, right, and birth caregivers, that is what's best in terms of outcomes for kids, right? Kids want to stay with their original families. So to the extent that it's possible, it's not always possible, but to the extent that it's possible, providing services, keep in mind most kids in the United States are removed and placed in foster care because of neglect, right? And neglect has a big overlap with poverty. So these are not necessarily kids who are physically abused. These are not necessarily kids who are sexually abused. These are children that come from families that need support, right? And if we're able to provide those kinds of supports, hopefully the outcomes of kids are going to be better. And there is, again, some federal legislation that is incentivizing states to do just that, right? To provide supports and services to biological families to hopefully prevent foster care from happening. Because once you take a child out, it's trauma, and there are a lot of negative consequences that are linked to that. And then one last thing is supports for kids who age out of the foster care system. We still have bad, negative outcomes for kids who age out of care, right? So only about less than 10% actually get a college degree, right? Only about half are employed. They're overrepresented, I'm sorry, in the justice system. So there are a lot of negative outcomes. They have experienced a lot of homelessness. And supports for these kids, right? Making sure that we provide services so they could be successful adults. That is our responsibility. We take responsibility for these children as a state, right? And we have to provide those kinds of services to make sure that they do well in adulthood. Yeah, that's about it on my end.
Thank you so much, Svetlana, for saying so much in such a short time. And I have to invite now Arian Craig and later Mario Gallo to be equally succinct. I'm sorry, we're running a little bit over time. Thank you for your patience. So Mario Gallo will now tell us about the St. Benedict's Preparatory School. He's been the director of admissions of this really unique project that I learned about actually because there is a documentary about it, as well as the abbey that it's linked to by the Buongiornos. So you can actually check that out if you want to learn more. Thank you, Mario, for being here with your students.
Thank you, Teresa, for inviting us today. And I'm here also with Dr. Cassidy here on my left. That is a former alumnus and another member that has, like Fulvio was describing, has taken this mission. Because St. Benedict's Prep is not a school like any other. Because within it has found itself throughout the times. St. Benedict's was founded in 1868, back when it was a German neighborhood. And so the monks that had arrived there in 1857 noticed that there was a need to educate the children of the German immigrants that had come for a better life for work. And fast forward, the Germans, then the Irish, the Italians, and then the minorities came, the African Americans and the Latinos arrived. And although the colors changed, the monks of St. Benedict's Prep remained, and hence decided to serve the new community that was there. Today, the students that I've brought are a representation of some of those ethnicities, but more so countries. Because Father Edwin, who in 1972 found himself as 26 years old, having been named headmaster of the school after the riots in Newark, if you're familiar, and a population of the monks of the monastic community, in fear of losing their lives, had relocated to a much safer rural environment. So St. Benedict's Prep closed, St. Benedict's school closed in 72 and reopened under the leadership of Father Edwin Leahy, which is still as our headmaster 50 plus years later, with a new mission. The new mission is to serve the community that was there now. And so in the year 2000, noticed that some of the same situation that Fulvio was describing, these broken families, right, these unknown children, needed to be rescued from their anonymity. This fundamental question, who am I? What do I live for? How do I get here? And so, like Cochabamba, it says, Father Edwin noticed that these children needed a place to belong and to be loved. And one of the advantages, the secrets of St. Benedict's Prep is the fact that the monks never left, never closed, the buildings never closed. In the year 2000, it changed radically because Father Edwin decided to build a dormitory for the children that he would notice on Monday through Friday were okay. And then on Monday, they would return after the weekend, there would be a mess for all the situations and the scenarios that they would encounter at home. What Svetlana was talking about, the negligence, there are all sorts of abuses. So built what is known as the Leahy House, the dormitory, that was meant to provide a home, a dwelling for those children in order to be able to concentrate on their studies, a Monday through Friday experience. And then, of course, it morphed into a 7-day experience, and it was supposed to be a calendar, an academic calendar only. And then it morphed into a 12-month experience for some of the children. And this allowed us to host children whose families were not able to take care of them. So students that live very close by within the city of Newark, but doesn't have a formal structure of support. And so the school became a place to educate and to form, right, academically the child, but also socially, spiritually, and emotionally. And this also allowed, it says coincidentally, but nothing happens by coincidence, that we've created a partnership, not with Cochabamba, but with Santa Cruz, through the Tawichi Football Soccer Club, who had the same mission, to rescue the children from the streets, no las drogas, ma sí al deporte. And we have the pleasure to have some of those children here with us. So we have 3 from Bolivia, 2 that are current students, and Victoria Gomez, who's here, right? Who's embarked, right, chosen out of the many thousands of students that are there in the academy in Tawichi for a shot on the future through sport, in this case through soccer, to the commonality of soccer. But Victor now has begun and has established himself studying here and begin to build a family here. So he's recently married with an American girl, and now he's continuing his life. Soon will have his own children, which he will send back to St. Benedict's Prep, of course, right? And here, just to give you a snapshot of who's here, so we have 3 from Bolivia, 4 from Dominican Republic, 1 from Mali, says Africa, another one, Timo from Mongolia, 1 from Brazil, because the Leahy House has given us the ability to host children. It says, and Cochabamba will be next for sure as well, right? To be able to host children who come from impossible cases, with the hope of securing a better future for themselves, but also for all the ones that are left behind. And obviously this awareness, this opportunity is something that travels. I'm very grateful that also the council is here so that we can build bridges, right? Some of the pictures that we have here is what St. Benedict has meant to be. Dr. Cassidy, coincidentally, did not know what he was coming to today. And it says, but he himself, taking advantage of Svetlana, has adopted a child, a student, that came to St. Benedict's Prep. Because many children come and are emancipated. Many children come from the different organizations, Diocese and Casa, right? And are entrusted to us for many years and are followed throughout. One, because this fundamental fact that is alluded to is love. Is the love that is expressed through a dedication that is more than the 9-to-5 job, but it's become a calling, a vocation of life. A vocation of life. no different than Father Berta, the Father Sergio, the Father Vavassori, and all of us that are here. So I'm grateful to be here. Also, this is my brother-in-law here is here as well. There is a program in Kenya, Ilaria with the Italian Cultural Institute here in New York, to become, and for all of us within our small world, within our reality, to express this fundamental sign of love, right? To receive the other as Jesus Christ. And then it says, how far can we go? Who knows how many people can be touched? It says, yes, it takes a village, but I like to point to the fact that Father Berta was one, Father Vavassori, one was sent, which then called others. And the same here today for all of us here. One invited us, and today we are here. Okay, I know we're over time, so that's all I would say.
Thank you so much. And I want to add, Mario, that some of your students are now on our campus, right? And so it's a very nice segue. And speaking of our campus, we now close with Arian Craig, who's responsible for many aspects having to do with students' life, but she's going to briefly talk about a program that I wasn't aware of, and I want to thank Svetlana for introducing me to it, which I think sheds light on the general philosophy of our campus and the mission of our university in terms of public service. Thank you, Arian.
Thank you so much. And I just wanted to express my thanks and my gratitude for being here. As I'm listening to everyone, I'm flooded with my own experiences prior to working for the Red Hawk Fellows. I was an investigator for the Division of Child Protection and Permanency, formerly known as DIFAS. And so I had the opportunity to be working in communities. I am of the communities that I worked in and with, and so it's been special for me to be here and to be representative. How far will we all go? Was the quote that was just stated, and I always answer, only God knows. And so I'm here to talk about the Red Hawk Fellows program, and that is a program that is on campus that assists students who are 24 and younger, who are experiencing housing insecurity and or food insecurity with additional services and resources. I do oversee the program, and we are restructuring, in the process of restructuring it, to focus on professional development and postgraduate housing and sustainability. So we have about 170 students that are in the program right now. The interest in the fields vary. We typically have programming that is offered throughout the semester. I'm sorry, let me backtrack. So part of one of the big aspects of the program is that students who fulfill that criteria are often involved in what we like to call resource care in the state of New Jersey. There's a lot of reframing going into educating the community about what the division is trying to achieve. And a lot of children who are in resource care there's a lot of focus on trying to place them with their kin. If not, then of course the resource parent. And so the youth who elect to come to Montclair State, we're always happy to have them, happy for them to be here. I work with them personally just to help guide them on their educational journey. So we do focus on life skills. We focus on mentoring, on coaching, budgeting, and it says finding an apartment, which speaks to that postgraduate housing. And so I've been working with donors, and we do, with the exciting development, are able to assist some of our graduating students with finding postgraduate housing this year. And we're also able to assist them or gifting them, some of them know and some of them don't, with contribution towards their apartment. So like I said, the focus really is on making sure that when students do graduate from Montclair, that they have a system in place that will help them be successful after graduation. We're not only focused on taking care of students while they're here, we want to make sure that you succeed in life. And so I tend to be straightforward. My students, my door is always open. I am also the student support case manager for the entire campus. So not only do I work with the Red Hawk Fellows, but I also work with students who sometimes find themselves in situations where they may be experiencing housing insecurity, but may not be 24 and younger. That doesn't mean that I can't assist you. It just means that it's outside of the Red Hawk Fellows program. So we do offer, my program is working out of the Dean of Students office, and we do offer other services as well. We have the Emergency Book Scholarship, which I also oversee in partnership with my colleague Brandon Rojas, that offers students with up to $250 per semester for the purchasing of books or materials that are associated with their classes. We have the Red Hawk Food Pantry, which is overseen with the Office of Social Justice and Diversity. I do a lot of work with the Office of Social Justice and Diversity with offering various services on campus. We also have Rocky's Closet, which offers professional clothing for students who are in the process of looking for internships and or interviewing for jobs. And the exciting development with that is that we're having a spring cleaning clothing drive. So we're looking to actually expand the closet to include articles of clothing for everyday wear and also for children as well. We want to be able to take care of our students who have families. And we're acknowledging that as we're moving toward being a school for the community, that we're going to be, encountering students from all different aspects of life, and we want to be able to assist them. Look, the professional clothing it's Rocky's Closet. And then we have the care team, the crisis assessment, response, and education team. And that's essentially like a committee of different faculty members. There are several members in the Dean of Students office who sit on the team in addition to Res Life, the University Healthcare Center, and various departments on campus. So any student that finds themselves in a situation where they need assistance and they're struggling, we encourage them to reach out and file a care report. That is the link for themselves. We encourage faculty and staff, if you come across a student that's having a situation, you can always submit a care report and someone will be assigned to them. They will reach out to talk with the student and figure out and find a solution to what's going on. So the student social services, I'm going to backtrack, that's just me. And that part of my job is I do a lot of community outreach, and it's my responsibility to be aware of community organizations that are within the community, so that if a student has a need that is beyond the reach of Montclair State University, we then we call on our community partners to assist. And so I'm able to kind of liaise. I'll personally walk a student over if I have to. Because I'm a social worker, and like I said, I've been working in these communities. I'm really about just getting the job done. And that is making sure that everyone, my hope is that everyone feels safe and supported. So that's part of the social services that we provide. And I think that is everything, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, that's my time.
Thank you. It's quite late, so I'm a little bit hesitant to ask whether there are questions from the floor, but maybe if there is one that is particularly pressing. I know that we have people from the Bolivian community also in the audience, so thank you for coming. Otherwise, I guess you can also approach the people personally. There is one, okay. Sorry, you need the microphone, otherwise we're not going to hear you.
Hi. Oh my goodness, this is all loud. I'm from Bolivia. I've been here for over 50 years, but recently I was in Bolivia. Ustedes hablan español, ¿verdad? Claro, sí. Ok, estuve en Bolivia hace como 2 meses. Fui a los carnavales. Estuve en Cochabamba. Y bueno, me tocó mucho todo lo que hacen ustedes por todos esos niños. Sé que existe eso y lo están haciendo un trabajo extraordinario. Les agradezco infinitamente por todo lo que hacen. Dios los bendiga. Y una última preguntita. Nosotros, ¿cómo podemos envolvernos y cómo podemos ayudar? ¿Qué se puede hacer ya? ¿Concretarse con un UNICEF o directamente a la casa de los niños? ¿Cómo se puede hacer?
How can we help the
How can we
project,
help?
she's asking. Fulvio, abbiamo proprio 2 minuti perché la sala poi purtroppo...
In italiano, in spagnolo, como...
En español,
español,
dígamelo en
español,
español.
sí.
Bueno, gracias a usted, señora, la invitamos allá al próximo viaje. Eso es lo primero. Segundo, yo decía siempre, la Ciudad del Niño no está construida o hecha por los que trabajan ahí. Es una familia que involucra desde el primero que regala un poquito de tiempo, un poquito de dinero o alguna idea para esos niños. Entonces, hay miles de maneras para ayudar. Un sueño mío es tratar también de involucrar la comunidad aquí, boliviana en New York. Pero no tengo que decirlo yo como señora, es usted que tiene que decírmelo a mí.
Bueno, muchas
Le
gracias.
agradezco por la pregunta y por el interés. Podemos también hablar.
Bueno, vamos a ver,
un
vamos a
ratito.
hablar con el cónsul, a ver qué nos dice. Bueno, muchas gracias.
So she, for those of you who may not have understood, she would like to get involved, and Fulvio said that's exactly what we are. It's not just La Ciudad del Niño, it's a much larger family, and since you want to get involved, tell me how. And so we can be also in touch with the consul, of course. Patti, brevissima.
I just wanted to say, it seems rare to bring so many incredibly inspiring people together in one place.
Oh.
Every one of you gave us something tonight to treasure. I thank you. I thank Teresa Fiore for bringing everybody together.
Oh.
Thank you.
Grazie, Patti. I can only follow, of course, Patty's words to thank everybody for being here, for being so patient, for being so informative, and certainly for being so inspiring on a theme that involves us all in one way or another. And we'll come back to you, I'm sure, with questions and opportunities to work together. Thank you very much, and to all of you as well.